Brooke Harrison didn't plan to text a mafia boss. She only wanted her daughters to stop asking when dinner would be ready. It was 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of suffocating New York night where the heat from a million apartments pressed against the windows and the sirens never stopped screaming. Brooke sat at the edge of her sagging mattress in the studio apartment's only bedroom, watching Chloe and Claire through the doorway. The twins, barely 5 years old, sat cross-legged on the worn carpet, coloring with broken crayons under the single lamp she'd left on. The baby slept in the bassinet beside her, mouth open, chest rising and falling with the kind of trust that made Brooke's stomach twist. The refrigerator hummed in the corner, nearly empty except for condiment packets and a half-gallon of milk she'd been rationing for 3 days. She'd given the twins the last of the cereal for dinner, dry, because the milk had to last until Friday. Her paycheck wouldn't clear until then, and the landlord had already slid a final notice under her door that morning. She picked up her phone with trembling hands, thumb hovering over Danny's contact. Danny, her old coworker, the one who'd lent her money twice before and hadn't returned her last 3 calls. She didn't want to beg again. She didn't want to hear that silence on the other end, the kind that said she'd become too much trouble, too desperate, too broken to fix. But Chloe had asked for toast before bed, just toast, and Brooke couldn't even give her that. She typed, her vision blurring, "Danny, I'm sorry to do this again. Can you loan me $100 for groceries? The girls need to eat. I get paid Friday. I'll pay you back. I promise." Her thumb hovered over the send button. She squeezed her eyes shut, hating herself, hating every choice that had led her here, hating the father who'd walked away the moment he found out she was pregnant with twins. She pressed send. She didn't check the number. She didn't look at the name at the top of the screen. She just set the phone face down on the mattress, pulled her knees to her chest, and tried to remember how to breathe. 4 minutes later, her phone buzzed. Brooke grabbed it, desperate for Danny's usual grudging, "I'll see what I can do." Instead, she the wrong number. Her stomach dropped. She stared at the message, then scrolled up to see the contact name. Unknown, not Danny. She'd texted a stranger. "Oh God, I'm so sorry. Please ignore. Wrong number." She locked the screen, tossed the phone onto the mattress, and pressed her palms against her eyes. Another failure. Another humiliation added to the pile. Across the city, on the 42nd floor of a penthouse that overlooked Manhattan, like a kingdom of glass and steel, Nicholas Arden stared at the message on his encrypted phone. Only 6 people had this number. Family, inner circle, no one else. The text wasn't spam. It wasn't coded. It was raw, unfiltered desperation bleeding through the screen. "Can you loan me $100 for groceries? The girls need to eat." He read it again. Then again. The phrasing caught him. The girls need to eat. Not, "I need money." Not, "Can you help me out?" A mother negotiating with her own dignity, putting her children first, even in a message to the wrong person. Nick leaned back in his leather chair, the city lights reflecting off the tattoos that crawled up his neck and disappeared beneath his collar. He should delete it, should block the number. He had a meeting in 20 minutes with his capos about the Vespucci situation, and he couldn't afford distractions. Instead, he typed back, "How old are your daughters?" Brooke stared at the message. What kind of stranger asks follow-up questions? Her first instinct was to block the number, report it, pretend this hadn't happened. But something about the question, the directness of it, the way it cut straight through her shame, made her pause. She shouldn't answer. She shouldn't engage. She should protect herself and her girls from whatever creep asked random questions about children. But her hands moved before her brain caught up. "They're 5, twins, and I have a baby. I'm sorry, this was a mistake." The response came immediately. "No mistake. How much do you need?" Brooke's breath caught. She typed slowly, testing the water, waiting for the catch she knew was coming. "I already told you, $100, but honestly, I don't take money from strangers. I'm sorry for bothering you." 3 dots appeared, then it disappeared, then appeared again. "Smart policy. I'm Nicholas. Now I'm not a stranger." She almost laughed, almost. The absurdity of it all, sitting in her falling apart apartment, texting with someone who thought a first name made this okay. She should stop. She should put the phone down and figure something else out. But there was nothing else. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Then she did something she never thought she'd do. She sent him her Venmo handle. The response was instant, a notification buzz that made her heart stop. $10,000 received from Nicholas Arden. Brooke's phone slipped from her hands onto the mattress. She grabbed it again, unlocked it, checked the app 3 times. The number didn't change. $10,000. This is a mistake. I only needed It's already yours. No catch. One less thing to worry about. Her hands started shaking. She couldn't type properly, had to retype the message twice. I don't understand. Why would you do this? Because your daughters need to eat, and because you asked for $100 when you probably need $10,000. Brooke hadn't cried when she got evicted from her last apartment. She hadn't cried when her car broke down and she couldn't afford to fix it. She hadn't cried when the twins' father said he wanted nothing to do with them, that he'd done his part and didn't owe her anything. But this shattered something inside her. She pressed her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face, shoulders shaking with silent sobs she didn't want Chloe and Claire to hear. Thank you. I don't even know what to say. Thank you. You don't have to say anything. Just take care of Chloe, Claire, and the baby. Brooke's breath stopped. She stared at the screen, reread the message, then scrolled up through their conversation. She never told him their names. She never mentioned twins specifically, not in a way that gave their names. She never said anything about the baby beyond mentioning its existence. Her blood went cold. How do you know my daughter's names? The 3 dots appeared, then vanished, then appeared again, slower this time. You mentioned them. She hadn't. She scrolled through every message again, her heart pounding in her throat. She'd said twins and the girls and a baby. Nothing more. No, I didn't. Who are you? No response. Brooke sat frozen on the edge of her mattress, holding her phone like it might explode, staring at $10,000 in her account and wondering what she'd just done. People don't just send thousands of dollars to strangers. Not without a reason. Not without a price. She grabbed her laptop from under the bed, fingers flying across the keyboard. Nicholas Arden, New York. The search results loaded, and Brooke's entire world tilted sideways. The first result was a news article from the New York Times. Arden crime family expands territory in Manhattan. NYPD powerless to stop it. The second was a photo. A man in a tailored black suit, tattoos visible on his neck and hands, walking out of a courthouse with an expression that could freeze blood. Nicholas Nick Arden, alleged head of the Arden crime family, suspected in 12 murders, untouchable, a mafia boss. Brooke slammed the laptop shut, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She'd just given her Venmo to a mafia boss, and he knew her daughter's names. Brooke didn't sleep that night. She sat with her back against the headboard, laptop burning hot on her thighs, scrolling through article after article about Nicholas Arden. Each one made her stomach turn harder than the last. Racketeering, money laundering, suspected involvement in the disappearance of a rival family's underboss. The photo showed a man who looked carved from ice and violence, his tailored suits doing nothing to hide the danger coiled beneath. What have I done? The question looped in her mind like a prayer she couldn't finish. She'd accepted money from a man who made people vanish. She'd given him access to her bank account, her full name, probably her address if he wanted it, and somehow, impossibly, he already knew about Chloe and Claire. Her phone buzzed at 6:23 a.m. She nearly dropped it. You looked me up. Brooke's hands went numb. He knew. Of course he knew. Men like Nicholas Arden probably had alerts on their own names, tracking anyone who searched for them. I need to return the money, she typed, fingers shaking so hard she had to retype it twice. You can't. I can transfer it back, please. I made a mistake. I didn't know who you were. And now you do. Keep it. Your daughters need to eat, remember? She wanted to scream. Would you keep money from a man like this? Would you trust that it came with no strings attached? The twins were still asleep, curled together under a thin blanket, and the baby hadn't woken for her morning bottle yet. Brooke looked at them, then at the $10,000 sitting in her account like a bomb waiting to detonate. What do you want from me? She finally typed. The response took longer this time. She watched Vaid, the three dots appear and disappear 4 times before his message came through. Nothing yet. Yet, that single word made her blood run cold. There it was. The hook she'd known was coming. Men like Nicholas Arden didn't give away money. They invested it. And Brooke had just become an investment as she never wanted to be. I can't be involved in whatever you do. I have children. I know you do. Chloe, Claire, and the baby. That's exactly why you will be. Her breath caught in her throat. Was that a threat? A promise? She stared at the screen, trying to decode the meaning, searching for the trap she knew was hidden in those words. If you were Brooke, what would you do? Run? Stay? The problem was, she had a feeling running wouldn't matter. Nicholas Arden had found her once. He could find her again. And this time, she wouldn't see him coming. Subscribe to find out what Nick's real plan is, because trust me, this is just the beginning. 4 days later, someone knocked on Brooke's door at exactly 8:00 p.m. 3 sharp raps, precise and deliberate. She froze in the kitchen, a jar of peanut butter halfway to the counter. The twins looked up from their coloring books, and the baby stirred in the bassinet. No one knocked at 8:00 p.m., not the landlord. Not the neighbors, no one who meant well. Brooke moved to the door, pulse hammering in her throat. She looked through the peephole, and her entire body went rigid. Nicholas Arden stood in the hallway, hands in the pockets of a charcoal suit that probably cost more than 6 months of her rent. The hallway's flickering fluorescent light cast shadows across the tattoos creeping up his neck. He wasn't smiling. He looked like he owned the building, the block, the entire city. She didn't open the door. What do you want? To talk. 5 minutes. His voice was low, calm, the kind of calm that made her skin crawl. We can talk through the door. Your neighbors can hear through the door, Brooke. Do you want them to hear this conversation? How did he know her name? She'd never told him. The Venmo. Of course, he'd probably known everything about her from the moment she sent that first text. Would you open the door? Would you let him in? She opened the door 6 inches, body blocking the gap. You have 3 minutes. Nick's eyes moved past her, cataloging the cramped apartment, the twins sitting on the floor, the bassinet in the corner. His expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his gaze. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. You have a teaching degree, he said. It wasn't a question. How do you... She stopped. Stupid question. What does that matter? I need a tutor for a family member. Private, discreet, well compensated. He pulled an envelope from his jacket and held it out. This is the offer. Fully furnished apartment in a secure building. Monthly salary, benefits, protection for you and your children. All you have to do is teach. Brooke didn't take the envelope. Teach what? To who? A 10-year-old boy, reading math, history, normal subjects, no questions asked. There it was, the trap she'd been waiting for. No questions asked meant illegal, dangerous, the kind of job that ended with people in witness protection or at the bottom of the Hudson River. I can't, she whispered. Nick's gaze shifted to Chloe and Claire. They were watching him with curious eyes, crayon-stained fingers frozen mid-drawing. Can't or won't. Both. Your landlord filed eviction paperwork yesterday. You have 14 days. He set the envelope on the doorframe. This offer expires in 72 hours. After that, you're on your own. He turned to leave, then paused. Your daughters deserve better than this, Brooke. You know they do. The door closed before she could respond. She stood there, staring at the envelope, hating him for being right, hating herself more for considering it. But as she looked at Chloe and Claire, at the peeling wallpaper and the empty refrigerator, one question burned through everything else. How far would you go to save your children? Hit subscribe, because Brooke's about to cross a line she can never uncross. 71 hours later, Brooke signed the papers. She told herself it was temporary, just until she got back on her feet, just until she found something else. But as the black SUV pulled up to the apartment building in Tribeca, gleaming and silent as a hearse, she knew she was lying to herself. There was no getting out. Not anymore. The apartment was on the 19th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, Marble countertops in a kitchen 3 times the size of her old place. Chloe and Claire ran through the room squealing, discovering a bedroom with 2 twin beds, stuffed animals already arranged on the pillows. Someone had been watching. Someone knew exactly what her daughters would want. The thought made Brooke's skin crawl even as relief flooded through her. Nick's driver handed her a keycard and a phone. Mr. Arden will send instructions. The phone stays on. Always. The job started the next morning. Another SUV, another silent driver, a 30-minute ride to an estate in Westchester that looked like it had been carved from old money and new violence. She was led through a side entrance, down a hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than she'd earned in a lifetime, to a wing that seemed separate from the rest of the house, isolated, hidden. Marco was waiting in the study, a thin 10-year-old with dark eyes that looked too old for his face. He didn't smile when she introduced herself. He just opened his math textbook and waited, like he'd been trained not to expect warmth from adults. Brooke taught him fractions, then grammar, then world history. He was bright, articulate, hungry for knowledge in a way that broke her heart. But he never asked questions, never mentioned family, never asked why his tutor was a stranger who showed up under guard. 3 weeks in, Brooke started noticing things, small things, the kind of details only a mother trained to spot danger would catch. The security logs on the hallway tablet showed entries at 3:00 a.m. on Tuesdays, always the same access code, always to Marco's wing. But no one ever came. Deliveries arrived in unmarked boxes left outside the study door, never inventoried. And once, just once, she heard Marco whisper into his phone in Italian, words she didn't understand but recognized the fear in his voice. What was she really tutoring him for? What was Nick hiding in this gilded cage, disguised as protection? She wanted to ask, but the phone in her pocket felt like a leash, reminding her that questions had consequences. Would you stay silent or would you dig deeper? Because Brooke was about to discover that some secrets are deadlier than others. Subscribe to see what she finds, because this job is about to become a lot more dangerous. Brooke spent her lunch breaks in Marco's study while he ate in the kitchen with his assigned caretaker. She told herself she was just organizing lesson plans, grading his work, preparing for the next session. But her eyes kept drifting to the tablet mounted by the door, the one that controlled the security system for the entire wing. It took her 3 days to figure out the access pattern. The same code unlocked the logs every time the caretaker stepped away. She memorized it the way she'd memorized her daughter's pediatrician's number, her landlord's extension, every critical piece of information that meant survival. On Thursday, she pulled up 6 weeks of entry data. The 3:00 a.m. Tuesday entries weren't random. They corresponded with a name that appeared in the delivery manifest. L. Vespucci. Supplies ordered. Inventory adjusted. But nothing ever arrived during the day. The numbers didn't balance. Someone was siphoning resources, hiding it in plain sight, using Marco's isolated wing as a blind spot in Nick's operation. She was so focused on the screen she didn't hear the door open behind her. Interesting reading material for a tutor. Brooke spun around, heart slamming against her ribs. Nick stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. The tattoos on his neck seemed darker in the afternoon light, streaming through the windows. He didn't look angry. He looked curious. Dangerous curious. She stopped. There was no explanation that wouldn't sound like a lie. You were accessing security logs you shouldn't know exist. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. How long have you been doing this? A week? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. There's a pattern. Someone named Vespucci is using this wing to move inventory off the books. Tuesday nights, 3:00 a.m., same access code every time. It's been happening for 6 weeks. Nick's eyes narrowed. He moved to the tablet, scrolled through the data she'd pulled up, his jaw tightening with each entry. When he finally looked at her, something had shifted in his expression. Calculation. Assessment. Luca Vespucci is a rival, Capo. He's been trying to find leverage in my organization for months. Nick's voice was cold, controlled. How did you figure this out? I'm a mother of 3. I notice when things don't add up. Brooke crossed her arms, refusing to look away. You hired me to teach Marco, but you're keeping him here like he's in witness protection. The logs don't match the deliveries. Someone's exploiting the fact that you trust your own system. Nick stared at her for a long moment. Then impossibly the corner of his mouth curved. Not quite a smile. Something sharper. You're not just a tutor anymore, Brooke. You're an asset. The call came at 2:17 a.m. Brooke jerked awake to her phone vibrating on the nightstand, Nick's name glowing on the screen. She answered before the second ring, adrenaline already flooding her system. Get the girls. Pack one bag. You have 10 minutes. What's happening? She was already moving, throwing off the covers, stumbling toward the twins' room. Luca knows about you. He made inquiries at PS 118, the school where Chloe and Claire were registered last month. He's testing my defenses, looking for pressure points. Nick's voice was calm, clinical, but she heard the edge beneath it. You're now a pressure point. Her hands shook as she woke at the twins, their sleepy protest dying when they saw her face. The baby was already crying, sensing the fear thick in the air. She grabbed diapers, clothes, the stuffed animals from their beds. 9 minutes, 8. The SUV was waiting when they reached the lobby. Not Nick's usual driver, someone older, harder, with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. He didn't speak. He just drove, winding through streets Brooke didn't recognize, heading north out of the city. The new safe house was in the Catskills, buried in the woods at the end of a gravel road that disappeared into darkness. It looked like a hunting lodge from the outside, all rough timber and stone. Inside, it was a fortress. Reinforced doors, surveillance monitors, panic rooms disguised as closets. Nick arrived 3 hours later, just after dawn. He found Brooke in the kitchen, the twins asleep on a couch in the living room, the baby finally quiet in her arms. He looked different, tired, the first crack she'd seen in his armor. The school inquiry was deliberate. Luca's letting me know he can reach your children if he wants to. Nick poured himself coffee, didn't offer her any, which means he knows you found something. Someone told him you were looking at the logs. Someone on your side. Yes, he met her eyes, which means I can't trust anyone in my inner circle right now, except you. Brooke felt the weight of those words settle over her like chains. You're using me as bait. I'm using you as the only clean asset I have left. Nick set down his cup. You collected the data. You know the pattern. Luca doesn't know how much you figured out, which makes you valuable. To both of us. And my daughters are safest if you help me end this. His expression didn't soften. Luca won't stop. He'll keep pushing until he finds a weakness. Right now, that weakness is you, unless we turn it into his. The baby stirred in her arms, making small sounds of hunger and need. Brooke looked down at her, then at the twins sleeping nearby, then back at Nick. She wasn't just an asset anymore. She was a target, and the only way to protect her children was to go deeper into the very danger she'd been trying to escape. Brooke couldn't sleep, so she did what she always did when her mind raced. She organized. She laid out every piece of information she'd collected over the past month, arranging it like a puzzle on the dining table after the children went to bed. Access logs, delivery manifests, payment records she'd photographed from Marco's study, the tutoring facility's financial statements Nick had carelessly left in his briefcase. That's when she saw it. The signature on the facility's quarterly reports matched the access code from the 3 a.m. entries. Not Luca's code, someone else's. Someone who had authority to approve expenses, move money, authorize deliveries without question. Anthony Russo, Nick's longtime capo, his most trusted financial officer. Brooke's blood went cold as the pieces locked into place. Luca wasn't infiltrating Nick's operation from the outside. He had help from the Wasan. Russo was laundering money through the tutoring facility's legitimate expenses, funneling cash to Luca while making it look like standard operating costs. Books for Marco, educational materials, security upgrades, all of it false. All of it feeding directly to Nick's enemy. How long had it been happening? How much had Nick lost without even knowing? And more terrifying, what would Russo do if he knew she'd figured it out? She heard footsteps behind her and spun around. Nick stood in the doorway, dressed in black, a gun holster visible beneath his jacket. He looked at the papers spread across the table, then at her face. You found something. It wasn't a question. Brooke nodded, her throat tight. It's Russo. He's the one feeding Luca information and money. He's been doing it through Marco's facility, hiding it in the educational budget. Every delivery, every access log, it all traces back to him. Nick moved to the table, studying her evidence with an expression that made her blood freeze. Pure, calculated rage. He picked up the financial statement, examined Russo's signature, then set it down with terrifying gentleness. I've known Anthony for 15 years. He was at my father's funeral. He's godfather to my cousin's daughter. His voice was empty, hollow. And he sold me out for what? Territory? A bigger cut? Leverage, Brooke said quietly. Luca has something on him. That's the only reason someone that loyal turns. Nick looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something shift behind his eyes. Respect, fear, recognition that she'd just handed him the key to ending this war or starting an even bloodier one. There's a meeting tomorrow night. Russo will be there. Luca's people will be watching. He pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. This ends tomorrow, one way or another. Would you trust a man like Nick and to handle this the right way? Or would you worry this tomorrow night everyone in that room might end up dead? Because Brooke just realized something terrifying. She's the only one who knows the whole truth, which makes her either the most valuable person in the room or the most expendable. Nick told her to stay at the safe house. He gave explicit orders, left 2 guards posted outside, made it clear this meeting was no place for a civilian. But Brooke had spent her entire adult life being underestimated, dismissed, told to stay out of things that concerned her survival. She wasn't staying behind. Not when her children's safety depended on what happened in that room. She arrived at the warehouse in Red Hook 30 minutes before the meeting, slipping past Nick's perimeter using the access code she'd memorized from the security logs. The vault was in the basement, a converted storage space with concrete walls and a single entrance. She could hear voices echoing down the hallway. Nick, Russo, others she didn't recognize. And then Luca Vespucci's voice, smooth and poisonous. You wanted this meeting, Arden, so let's talk terms. Brooke moved to the doorway, staying in the shadows. She counted 8 men. Nick stood at the head of a steel table, Russo to his right, 3 other capos flanking him. Luca sat across with his own muscle, relaxed, confident, like he'd already won. The terms are simple, Nick said, his voice cold. You withdraw from my territory, or I eliminate every asset you have in this city. Luca laughed. With what leverage? You can't even keep your own house clean. How many of your people are on my payroll, Nick? 2? 3? Russo's hand moved toward his jacket. Brooke saw it before Nick did. She saw the setup, the way Luca's men had positioned themselves, blocking the exit. This wasn't a negotiation, it was an execution. She stepped into the light. 4, actually. Her voice cut through the room like glass. Every head turned. Nick's expression went from shock to fury in half a second, but she kept talking. Anthony Russo has been funneling your money to Luca for 6 months, using Marco's tutoring facility as the laundering front. $340,000 in fraudulent educational expenses, all traced back to Russo's authorization code. She pulled out her phone, projecting the financial records onto the vault wall using the overhead system. Numbers, signatures, timestamps, every piece of evidence laid bare. Luca knew you'd bring Russo to this meeting because you trust him. He was supposed to kill you the moment you turned your back. Brooke looked directly at Russo, whose face had gone white. But Luca made one mistake. He didn't know someone was watching the numbers. The room exploded into motion. Russo lunged for his gun. Nick was faster, his weapon already drawn, pressing against Russo's temple before the traitor could blink. Luca's men moved, but Nick's capos were ready now. Weapons out, the balance of power shifting in a heartbeat. Sit down, Luca, Nick said quietly, never taking his eyes off Russo. Or I paint this vault with your capo's brain and we see who walks out alive. Luca's confidence cracked. He sat, and Brooke realized she'd just saved Nick's life and earned something far more dangerous than his gratitude. She'd earned his dependency. Subscribe now because what Nick does next will change everything. Brooke didn't watch what happened to Russo and Luca. Nick had her escorted out of the vault before the first shot was fired, but she heard it. A single crack that echoed through the warehouse, then silence. When Nick emerged 20 minutes later, his hands were clean, his expression unreadable. 2 bodies would be found in the East River by morning. The news would call it gang violence. The truth would stay buried in concrete and loyalty. Nick drove her back to the safe house himself, the first time he'd been alone with her since this all started. He didn't speak for the first 10 miles, just gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, processing what she'd done, what she'd become. "You shouldn't have been there," he finally said. "But I was, and you're alive because of it." He couldn't argue with that. When they pulled into the gravel driveway, he killed the engine but didn't get out. The forest pressed close around them, dark and watching. Luca's network is gone. Russo's accounts are frozen. The leak is sealed. Nick turned to face her. "But you know too much now. You've seen too much. That makes you either family or a liability." Brooke's heart hammered against her ribs. Was this the moment he decided she knew too much to live? That her usefulness had an expiration date? "I need someone I can trust to manage the clean operations. The legitimate businesses, the shell companies, the finances, no one else can see the full picture of." His eyes were dark, intense. "You see patterns others miss. You think like an outsider, which makes you invaluable. I'm offering you a position. Real salary, real authority, absolute protection for you and your children under my family's name. And if I say no," Nick's expression didn't change. "You won't. Because you know what happens to people who walk away from this world. They spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulder, wondering when the past catches up." He leaned closer. "I'm not giving you a choice, Brooke. I'm giving you a future. One where Chloe, Claire, and the baby never have to worry about being hungry again. Where they grow up protected, educated, safe. Where you have power instead of desperation. What would you choose? Freedom with fear or security with strings attached?" Because Brooke was staring at the man who just eliminated 2 people without hesitation, offering her everything she'd ever wanted. And the terrifying part was, she wanted to say yes. She wanted the safety, the power, the guarantee that her children would never suffer the way she had. Even if it meant belonging to a world she'd once feared, she was already too deep to pretend there was another way out. 3 months later, Brooke stood in the kitchen of her new apartment on the Upper West Side, watching Chloe and Claire chase each other through rooms filled with light and laughter. The twins had gained weight, their cheeks round and healthy, their smiles coming easier now. The baby sat in a high chair, gumming a teething ring, surrounded by toys that cost more than Brooke used to make in a month. The refrigerator was full. The rent was paid. The fear that had lived in her chest for years had finally started to fade. She'd taken Nick's offer. Not because she had no choice, but because she'd stopped lying to herself about what she wanted: security, power, a future where her daughters never knew hunger or desperation. She managed his clean operations now, turning laundered money into legitimate investments, spotting weaknesses before they became threats. She was good at it, better than anyone expected, better than she'd expected herself. The door opened and Nick walked in, still wearing his suit from whatever meeting had kept him across town. He looked at her first, then at the children playing in the living room, and something in his expression shifted, softened in a way she'd never seen before. "They're happy," he said quietly. "They're safe." Brooke poured him coffee without asking, the routine familiar now. That's what matters. Nick took the cup but didn't drink. He just stood there, watching Chloe show Claire a drawing she'd made, the baby babbling nonsense from the high chair. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, deliberate, weighted with meaning. "I want this. Permanently." Brooke's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "I mean you, them, this." He gestured at the apartment, at the life they'd built in the space between danger and salvation. "I want you in my life, Brooke. Not as an employee, not as an asset, as family, mine." She should have been terrified, should have remembered who he was, what he'd done, the bodies he'd left behind to get here. But when she looked at him, she saw the man who'd sent her money when she had nothing, who'd protected her children when they were most vulnerable, who'd given her power when the world had only ever taken it away. "You're asking me to choose you, permanently." "I'm not asking." His eyes held hers. I'm claiming you, Chloe, Claire, the baby, you're already mine, Brooke, have been since the moment you sent that text. I'm just making it official. It should have sounded like a threat, like ownership, but coming from Nick, it sounded like a promise, an unbreakable vow that no one would ever hurt them again, that they would always be protected, always be safe, always be his. Brooke stepped closer, closing the distance between them. Then I accept. All of it. The danger, the protection, you and were yours. Nick's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. No going back. I know. And she did. This was her dark salvation, her dangerous redemption. She texted a mafia boss by mistake and found the one thing she'd been searching for her entire life. Someone who would burn the world down to keep her and her children safe. If you've made it this far, subscribe to see what other stories unfold in this world, because Nick and Brooke's journey is just the beginning.